Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first CLO Coffee Club. I hope you can hear me. Amanda, could you nod if you can hear me? Great. This is going to be a place where engaging minds will come together to talk about engaging topics like data and content and technology, and as tangibly as possible, and more so than at many other events that we have all attended in the industry. So we'll have thought leaders and suppliers and partners and even competitors to filter attend these events and share those interesting thoughts. And really, it's just about bringing anyone who thinks deeply and is happy to share openly on these topics. There's also coffee. So you should have had an invitation to or a voucher to get some coffee. I mean, you probably got access to your own coffee anyway. But if you don't, and if you'd like to try that, then yeah, please take advantage. That actually won't be for me because I gave up coffee, ironically, about four months ago. But you guys enjoy. So this one is the first of these. It'll be this is the first in a series. The topic is cutting through the noise. What does that mean? What do we mean by that? What do you mean by that? We'll get to a little bit later. Okay, so I want to give 3 examples of this. So first is the weather. There's a guy called Nate Silver who's written a book called The Signal in the Noise that you can see on the screen. The tagline of this book, which you may have heard of, even if you haven't read the book, is "Why Most Predictions Fail, but Some Don't." And it's all about how the media portrays statistics and talk about probabilities in really inexact and very often misleading ways, particularly in politics. And so he's complaining for a lot of the book about how that's been treated. But then he uses weather as the best example of how progress has been made, making sense through the fog of data, pardon the pun, over the last 20 or 30 years. I highly recommend that book. Also really recommend his website, which is 538allerswords.com, which has all sorts of stats to do with sports, politics, and other things. So, if you're into football, for example, you can see a Premier League table with the points and the kind of stats as they are as facts, but also probabilities of which for each and every team, probabilities of winning the Premier League this year. So right now, 51% chance that Man City win. It's just a 2% chance that Man United win for the record, Sam. So yeah, check that out. Second perspective on cutting through the noise is the TLDR. So this is funny because the meaning has changed over time. It used to be, and this is where it sort of originated, an editor's note to say that this is too long. I'm not going to read it. There's too many words, too much noise. And now it's often put at the top of an article. I actually do this for a lot of my blog posts to highlight the exact opposite, the succinct summary of what that article is really about, i.e. the signal. So that, the meaning of TLDR has, for some people, me included, flipped from noise to signal over time. The third example is from our work and our industry. So everyone has a phrase like this sea of content on LXP and LMS, SharePoint, and people are drowning in it to extend the metaphor. Our product called Content Intelligence generates the data to cut through that noise and get to the content that really matters. So you can see on this example that you start with a huge number of assets in a big firm, and you get to just 8 or just 15 or just 25 that really will make a difference according to the parameters that you set. Format, relevance, duration, all of the factors that are relevant to considering what content is important to you. We'll offer a demo. I mean, obviously not as this talk, because this is going to be uncommercial, but we'll do that after this for anyone that wants to hang around after the hour. So those were 3 examples on the theme of how to cope better in an infernally busy world where there's just so much stuff going on, so many meetings, so many emails, so much content, so much data. How do you draw out the signal? I mean, that's something that we all face every day, which is why we wanted to open this series of coffee clubs on this topic. Okay, that's enough noise from me. I want to introduce two people who have influenced my thinking about learning, data, technology the most over the past few years. That's Amanda Nolan and Laurie Hoffman, who have come together and a couple of years ago and formed NilesNolen. You can see their awesome logo, which makes a lot of sense on screen. And I want to be specific. So I said at the start, let's be tangible in all of these discussions. How have these two people influenced my thinking? Well, here's a couple of examples. In Amanda's case, it's been a lot about exactly the title of this coffee club, this get together of determining that signal from the noise in our messaging, making the message really crystal clear. We've still got a way to go. I've still got a way to go, but as I think many companies do. But Amanda's been really helpful with seeing that. And in Laurie's case, well, I was sitting in a talk that she was giving in Madrid some time ago. It was pre-COVID, maybe it was 2.5, 3 years ago. And she was talking about one of the things that she talks expertly on, which is data-driven learning design, learning strategy. And she gave a tangible example. And that made me sit up, because tangible examples are a rare thing at these sorts of talks. I don't mean Laurie's talks, I mean talks in general. And the tangible example was, take a look, if you want to understand what your audience, your workforce is curious about, one port of call, an early port of call, should be the search queries, the search terms that they're putting into your LXP or your SharePoint, whatever the systems are. That's relatively easy data to get a hold of. And of course, it doesn't give you all of the answers. There's quite a lot of noise in that data. And there'll be some obvious stuff as well. Like, would you expect Agile to show up? Would you expect Excel to show up? Yeah, of course you would. And then you'll see it in the data. But the, how much does Agile show up relative to Excel? That could be interesting. Are there some surprises in it? It leads to all sorts of questions, which has really been useful for us thinking about the development of our product and what we do. So I'll always be grateful to Laurie for a few things actually, but that is one. So Laurie, Amanda, welcome. Thank you for being here. How are you doing? And how are you finding AirMeet so far?
Well, first of all, Mark, thank you very much for the gracious introduction. I'm a massive fan of the work that you do, so those words genuinely mean a lot. And it is a pleasure to be here in general. And thank you for pulling this event together. Really enjoying AirMeet and like the format. And I'm looking forward to the chance to mingle a little bit.
How's AirMeet for you? Thank you, Laurie. How's AirMeet for you, Amanda?
Yeah, likewise, I was really enjoying the non-breakout sessions, the actual sort of tables that had a bit of a different feel prior to the session. So yeah, eager to dig into this exciting topic. Welcome everyone, and thanks for having us, Filtered.
I've already spoken too much, so I'm going to quickly get into some questions for you guys, and then at about 20 past we'll go to tables on AirMeet. So the first question is about something I mentioned earlier of data-driven learning design, learning strategy. So for both of you, but I'm going to start with Laurie. What is that for you, and who would you say that you can call out as doing a good job, and why?
Certainly. So when we talk about data-driven learning strategy, it's not just looking at data in the beginning, although that's the starting place, but it's also being iterative about it. So at the beginning, whenever you're looking, you want to gather insights before you make any decisions. So the insights, to your point, could be search terms. It could be understanding the ebb and flow of how people are working, gathering data from, say, Teams or Slack, understanding what's happening in the workplace. It could be about what content's being consumed, what content's being ignored. It could be data about what's going on in the business. And that gives you insights to understand what should you be focusing on. Once you identify those, you design back into what the data is telling you, the digital body language of what people are consuming and how they're operating in their day-to-day. And then you want to monitor and see, are you actually getting the traction and seeing results on the KPIs? So that's a very high level version of it. But I think the thing to remember about it is that it is very cyclical. It's not some place that you just start with data and end with data. It's something that you're always revisiting and refining. In terms of people who are doing it well, there are some companies out there. One that I like to point out, it's a Canadian bank, Banque de Montréal, or BMO, it's most likely called here, and they're doing some very interesting work around skills data. Novo Nordisk is also doing a lot of great work around data, and you can see some of their, I believe that they have some papers going out. You'll see them also on LinkedIn. Amanda?
Yeah, I think those are two great examples. I don't really have much more to add.
Why do you think? Because it's kind of an obvious thing in a sense, right? Use the data to inform your decision making about technology, about processes, about what learning should be done by whom and when and how. And yet the industry does seem to sort of have this thing about data, like it's either a blocker or it's it's a big thing to get over, like it's an ordeal. What's up with our industry, do you think?
Well, I think the main thing is L&D is always up against, and this is not just about data, is that people have this Dunning-Kruger effect that because they've gone to school, they've done, probably at least 12, if not more, years of education that they know learning. So they think they know what people need. So I think that's the first hurdle. The second one is that the LMS or the LXP, it's tracking the wrong data. I mean, it's tracking data we need for compliance and basics, but it's not tracking all the other data. So it feels like, well, where do I go? Because I don't touch those other systems that have this data that I need. The other thing too is I think when it comes to data, people are imagining, Tableau and massive Excel spreadsheets that they need to, manipulate, and it gets people get very nervous and twitchy about that. But the fact is, it can actually be quite easy. So I think those are part of the three. But if you get data right, it is jujitsu when it comes to managing requests and cutting through the noise, because you can actually have some tangible pieces to say, look, before you make that decision, let's look at some of the data pieces here.
I'd even take it a step back, really, is about not, existing in this learning bubble and talking about only learning metrics, but really thinking about the business metrics and, what are you trying to actually change from a business outcome perspective? And then I get in trouble because they say, well, it's not just about the business, it's about the people. But in my mind, those two things are not mutually exclusive, because actually, if we're doing the right thing for the future of the business, probably that means that the people that work there are going to have a better chance at getting promoted or at least staying relevant and employed. So it's about as well thinking from a data perspective, what are the critical skills that the company needs to get to the next stage. And then to Laurie's point, don't boil the ocean. Data can be scary if you try to do it all at once, but if you start from a really simple, tangible place and try to move the needle on some specific tangible skills gaps that you have, then really it is doable.
There's a Jeff Bezos quote, or at least a quote that's attributed on some pages on the internet to him, where he says, apparently, if it's my opinion versus your opinion, my opinion wins. But if it's my opinion versus your opinion plus data, you may win. You may win. You probably still won't, but at least you stand a chance. And that's kind of the point that we've both been referring to there, which is that data can help cut through noise to win an argument, or at least persuade. Let's not put it as aggressively as winning an argument. When it's never really that obvious, but data can start to be a big part of making decision making smoother and more correct.
You're absolutely right. And honestly, we're in a situation where a lot of companies are restructuring. It's a cost-cutting scenario for many people. And so, really, it is time for learning to be able to connect it to business value and make that business case. And if you don't have data points to do that, it is, like you said, it is just an opinion. And it's a risk.
Yeah, and I mean, on the tangible thing and making these things tangible, that anecdote I told about the talk that Laurie was giving in Madrid, I mean, I would urge anyone on this call who doesn't already make a start. have a look at that search data. That's a very, very simple request to make from IT, or maybe you can do it on it yourselves. You don't need to start with a lot of data. It could be a month or 3 months, and you will just, people talk about data-driven insights. Okay, well, how does that happen? What about the insights bit? Look, if you just look at that data, the insights will come. Your brain will work something out. There'll be something that's a bit odd, or something that really makes sense, or something maybe it just actually backs up an opinion you already had. But then your opinion will be data driven. It's really obvious, but it's just such a good tangible first port of call. From Laurie. The time's flown already. I'm going to just ask one more question, and then we're going to go to these tables. So for you guys, NilesNolen, you're advising companies, you're advising vendors, individuals, you're giving advice all the time. What has shifted over the past 18 months? I mean, a lot's shifted in the world, but in terms of the advice that you guys are being asked to give, what would you say has changed the most?
I think what I would say is that I don't like saying the new normal, because that's not it. But people have moved away from trying to replicate normalcy, which is what we reacted to in the beginning, and now they're looking to how do we thrive in this environment, because this is where we are. And so to me, that's very exciting, because we're no longer trying to recreate the past. We're moving to the future. And I think people are also realizing that we can accelerate a lot faster than what we thought. The velocity of things is moving wonderfully. We had one company who they were originally going to launch Teams, and L&D had this huge, this is a multinational company, 200,000 people. They had this big plan for rollout and courses and whatnot. It was October 2020 was their timeline. Well, March 13th, they just hit go live, because everybody was locked down at that point, and they realized they could do it, and they had that agility. Now, I don't want to always live in that spin cycle, but companies are far more open about the exciting things that we can do, because they've seen we do have that resilience. So to me, that's been great.
And I would just add to that, I think a lot of companies, especially the less mature organizations from an L&D perspective, rush to, oh God, we have to have stuff online now, we have to go digital. And so they bought a bunch of content libraries, they threw a bunch of stuff online, and it was this smorgasbord approach, where now I think we're at another stage where now these organizations are thinking, okay, well, to the point of the title of our session today, we got to cut through the noise. More is not always more, and how do we make sure that we get the best relevant content to the right people, both for them, but again, to close those critical skills gaps in the organization. So I think that's kind of, it's good that COVID has accelerated this push to digital, because I think it's good to have that in your arsenal. But then how do we make sense of that? How do we give people some guided experiences as well, and make sure that we get the right stuff to the right people?
Thanks, guys. I'm going to invite Toby and Martin to come on stage, and they're going to be talking. We've been working with GSK. Filter have been working with GSK for the past year and a half, couple of years. So they'll be talking about that, but I'm sure the conversation will branch out from that project. So Toby, Martin, over to you.
Hi, everyone, and hello, Martin.
Hi, everybody.
So I hope everyone's had an enjoyable session so far, and met some interesting people. So obviously it's a really big topic, but already we've had a great example of how you can cut through that difficulty and that complexity with that, gem of looking at search terms, finding search terms first. I know that really resonated on the table that I was on. So hopefully we can do something similar, talking through the work that Filtered and GSK have been doing together. So I wonder, maybe if the best place to start, Martin, is to ask you to summarize what you worked with Filtered over the past 18 months or so, what that looked like from end to end as a process, and then I'll drill into ask some specific questions on certain points of it.
Yep, sure thing. So as part of my role in the Centre of Excellence for People Development, I took on skills and content from a strategic perspective, and had this situation where we had a skills framework which had been developed probably about 7 years ago. and hadn't really been looked at since then. We were just in the middle of deploying a new experience platform, And we had also just signed up for 3 huge content vendors with thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of content, which came with it in multiple languages. And so the challenge was really how what do we need to do with all of that, and what did I need to do with it? And really the key kind of areas of focus were, first of all, how do I make sure that the skills framework is up to date and relevant? And I think the key focus for me there in terms of that is, what are people actually focusing on from a skills perspective? What do we want people to be focusing on from an organizational perspective on skills? And also, if that's now, what about future? So what do we want people to be focusing on, and what will people want to focus on from a skills perspective in the future as well? So after we got that piece of work done, it was then taking the thousands of pieces of content and figuring out what to do with that. And I always remember the first time I spoke actually to Filtered in the coffee house, and I think 2 nights before that, I'd spent 4 hours watching.
I always think of this, Martin, the big weekend or whatever it was. Literally all weekend, you were just working with this massive spreadsheet with all of this content, like trying to map it.
10,000 lines of content, and I was clicking yes or no manually. That's dead serious. So that was the initial approach, which obviously, which obviously wasn't sustainable from a mental health perspective. Let's put it that way. So needed to figure out a better way to do that, I think. And then really onward, what does that look like? How do we update it? How do we iterate it? How do we get better and make sure the relevant content is easily accessible by our people?
Yeah. And so the onward journey from there has been, as you said, to refresh that skill framework and make sure it's aligned and push it into the LXP solution there. And so can you tell us, talk a bit more about any cost savings, or what benefits did you get? I mean, because arguably the spreadsheet process, I mean, would have made your life a misery, but maybe GSK would have put up with that. It was a fine. Well, it kind of ruined Martin's life for a few months, but he'll get it mapped and then it's done. So what's the ROI? What's the reason for bringing in some technology to try and approach that tagging prioritization problem?
Yeah, I mean, from a resourcing perspective and the people needed, it was a big saving in terms of the amount of time needed to be spent to achieve a much better outcome, actually, of the work and the tagging that we did. I think it was a couple of 100,000 when you look at the cost saving there. Also, when you look at the amount of content. So what became quite clear actually was I didn't need to pay for the volume of content that I was paying for. And I could actually go back and look at the contracts that we'd signed for the volume of content that we'd signed and look to do something a little bit different. So I think it was about 200,000 or 300,000 that we saved.
Wow. So I really like that. I'm interested as to how being able to apply your skill framework, not just the vendor skill frame, but your skill framework as a lens helped with those conversations. What was it like having putting skills front and center when you're talking to content vendors, but also to the business as well? Because this must have made some kind of impact on how you were seen in the business and what you could do off the back of it.
Yeah, I mean, it just gives a very clear data-led frame of reference and discussion point. I think Mark mentioned it earlier on about when you have a conversation with data, the Jeff Bezos quote that he made. Actually, I kind of genuinely feel like I lived that a bit. And honestly, it's the first time I ever have done. I think historically in my L&D life, I've used data, but I don't believe I've used it as well as we did here. And being able to have a conversation to say, well, this is the skills framework, and this is why it is our skills framework, and this is why it's relevant. These are the data points that we used in terms of looking at what are people consuming, in terms of our 180 survey, line manager feedback, in terms of external publications and what they're saying, focus groups, all the different data points that we used. It just gives real clarity. And if I think about you put two lenses on it there. In terms of working with vendors appreciate it, quite frankly, because you can actually say, these are the areas that we want to focus on. What can you deliver in right? And so it's easy for them. And some of them will say that, actually that's not our area of strength. That's not for us. Some will say, yeah, great. And you can start making much better decisions on the right content vendors that you want to work with. From a stakeholder perspective, again, just makes it a lot easier to talk about why you're taking a particular direction, whether it be from a content vendor perspective or actually the skills that you've chosen.
There's something about vision, isn't there? Once you can see it, once something's out in the open and we can talk clearly, everyone benefits. Even if it's a harder conversation, it's better. So I know you need to leave us in a couple of minutes. So just to help steer the workshop version of this. Not everyone's sat on top of a story where they used some data to make some decisions and got some value. When we break up into smaller tables to discuss related examples, would you give any advice to the people around the room today about how they can start to use data with skills in this kind of way?
I think it's just, frankly, looking at what you've actually got available in your organization. That's honestly where I started. The big challenge I think we all have is data is still really, really difficult to pull. So what actual tangible data points have you got that you can use, and what one or two or three can you use to support whatever piece of work you're doing? Great.
I think that's a really awesome closing piece of advice. So thanks so much, Martin, for your time and sharing that story with everyone. I really appreciate it. There's a quick question. Is it fair to ask him to answer it? Yeah, Martin, are you using search data? You've seen it. It's popped up. You can't get away from it. Are you using search data to inform your skills framework?
We did. I think it's become more important now than it was when we initially did the piece of work, because we had quite a new platform. But I think it's one data point out of many. So what else does that sit alongside?
Excellent. Okay, so now we're going to break back down into some tables. Thank you very much, Martin, for your time. And for another 10 minutes, we'll have an opportunity to discuss this and come back together. I've absolutely forgotten how to do this using AirMeet. So please, someone, Mark, if you did it before.
Sam, no, I didn't. Sam's going to do it, Toby. It's all taken care of. I keep getting cut off. Getting cut off when that happens. That's one thing actually that Zoom does do better. It gives you a warning. Actually, it gives you too many warnings, these countdowns. But it is true that it is 3 minutes until the top of the hour. So I should probably just close this off. So I said at the start, I mean, first of all, I should say thank you all for coming. Thank you to Laurie and Amanda and Martin and Toby for getting on stage and speaking, and actually the other people that raised their hands and came on stage briefly. I said at the start of this that we wanted to keep it as tangible as possible. So three things that are tangible. One, there's a LinkedIn group, which honestly I didn't even think was a very good idea to associate with this event. Who goes to LinkedIn groups? We had more than half of you guys join it, and you've literally just got to click accept invite. So you have an invite in your inbox. It's really easy, and then we're just at least connected on there. So some of the things that you've heard from other people on here, you can connect on LinkedIn and have your own conversations. So that's tangible thing number one. Tangible thing number two is get some data. Get some of that search data if you haven't looked at it already. It sparked some interest from some of the guys, some of you guys already, and it gives you a lot more force in the argument. The third thing that you can do is work with us, and we can generate data that can help with these decisions, as you've heard from Martin. It's to indicate which providers can make most sense for you and which individual assets make most sense for your audience. But independently of us, I want to make the point that when companies, providers talk about AI and AI generated this and AI generated that, get an example of that output and what that benefit is. So, and that really should be free of charge. I mean, that's what we would do. That's what we do. Rather than sort of just going along with the marketing rhetoric or only getting to the benefits of AI some way down the line. So whoever it is that you work with in this area, get those tangible benefits. Thanks again, everyone. I think we're done.